Hello there, woman beings, and welcome to another episode of the Woman Being Podcast. I am Emma, and I'm here joined, as always, with my lovely, lovely, incredible, beautiful, phenomenal, stupendous, and splendid co-hosts, Kelly.
Hello.
And Kelly Ann.
Hello.
And today we are joined by the beautiful, stunning, phenomenal, stupendous, splendid.
Good, I get the same introduction.
I'm running out of adjectives. Miss Ellee Emery, welcome.
Thank you.
We are so excited to talk to Ellie today. She is a boudoir photographer. She is a feminist boss lady, and she is also an aspiring lawyer. And she's going to talk to us about all sorts of things today. You guys don't want to miss it. You better tune in. Let's dive right in. You better tune in. They're already tuned in.
You better tune into this one, guys.
You better tune in while you're already listening. This is Woman Being,
where we explore thoughts and opinions
and have the freedom to change our minds.
Without expectation or judgment,
we will hold a safe space and support each other
as we navigate together in the form of feminine.
Ellie, hello. We're so happy and excited to have you here today. And I think we're just going to jump in head first and start talking about what you do and what you're all about. So could you tell us a little bit about what you've been doing and like working towards in advocacy for women's bodies and just like what led you there? Give us a little, like a little bio.
Like a little introduction post.
Yeah.
So I started as just a photographer in general when I was like 14. I've been doing it for a million years, feels like at this point.
So you're a million and 14 years old.
Congratulations, you look amazing.
Thank you.
You got to tell us your skincare routine.
Right, that'll be the next podcast. But I just always have loved photographing people and just telling people stories. And so I kind of never really found like a niche that I loved. As I did photography, I kind of just did it as a hobby, and then I just turned into wedding photography, portrait photography, and just kind of like anything that I could do with it. But a few years ago, I just did a like quick boudoir shoot for my sister when she was getting married. And I just realized like how much I loved capturing just like the authenticity of her. And just like, it kind of just stripped everything back, and it was less of like a production, and it was more so just like, oh, this is just her. I just loved like capturing the humanity of it. And so then I just kind of deep dove on that and just was like anyone I could find who would be willing to do a boudoir type shoot. And I was like, okay, this might be what I love. But living in Reading, I have not found many that are willing. And so I kind of just ended up doing a ton of like self-portraits. And that kind of took me on like a whole new journey of kind of just experiencing like what that was like to be vulnerable and accept and like see my own body. And I've always kind of been in the world of, I hate the classic like body positivity type phrasing, but kind of just like learning to be human and accept our bodies for what they are. And so it kind of just, I realized that I could connect it all together to kind of like gather the pieces of learning how to help people and myself like accept their bodies and see their bodies and love them and like feel beautiful in just a new way that they've never felt before. So that's kind of where it all started, and it's kind of just kind of merged into many different things throughout the years since starting it.
And I mean, it's really vulnerable being being the subject of like a boudoir shoot. In a way, it almost feels more vulnerable to me than like sort of like fine art, like nude photography. Because like when I was in photography school, there were a lot of people that did like nude photography and stuff, and like that was considered like a very classic like fine art avenue to go down. But boudoir adds the element of like being sexy at the same time, because so much of like nude photography is not necessarily sexy. You know, it's sort of just presented, and it's a different way of showing the body. And so like to sit in front of a camera and say like, yes, like this is my body, and also like I am, you know, sexual and powerful, and I'm going to like openly embrace that in an image that lasts forever. Like that's a big deal.
Especially like I know most of us have grown up in like purity culture. We were kind of just taught like your body is not sexual, and if it is, that is bad, and it's only sexual in a bad way. And so it's like it is vulnerable to put yourself in front of a camera and be like, no, you're actually allowed. You're allowed to feel sexy right now. Like that, the conversations I have with a lot of the girls I photograph are literally that, where like I could see that they're trying and they're like, oh, like, no, but I can't pose like that because it's too sexy. And I'm like, no, this is what you're trying to do right now. Yeah. We are trying to make you look sexy right now. Sexy. Like this, that is exactly what we're doing. Yeah. But yeah, just kind of like, it kind of changes people's mindsets, I've realized. So a lot of the times, I end up doing a shoot with someone and they come in and they're like, no, I know how to be sexy. You're like, I know, I feel sexy. But they'll start and then they'll have just a moment of like, oh, like, I can do this just for me. Or like, oh, like, I don't actually know how to do this right now and I don't feel comfortable doing this. And then it's kind of like, it becomes a moment of like, you're allowed to just inherently be a sexual human. Like, you don't have to, this doesn't have to be for anyone. And it doesn't have to, like, be anything. It's just for you to, like, feel comfortable in this part of yourself. Yeah. Because just as women, we are all sexual beings. Yeah. Like, that's what we're created to be. Yeah. Well, right. All humans are sexual beings. Yeah. And it's just such, like hidden, secretive, like, shameful part of your body or part of your life that people are, they just don't know how to access that without bringing up all of the shame and fear. Yeah.
It's so interesting because it feels like you're almost facilitating a discovery of what sexy looks like on individuals. Yeah. And like, it feels like sometimes being sexy, quote unquote, is like a performance. And it sounds like what you're describing is they're coming in like, I know how to be sexy. I'm going to perform. But then it feels like there's probably a process of like resting back in yourself and just being throughout that process, which feels really, that's really cool.
Yeah, it really is. Because, and I have also recently decided or realized that I just will not do any more of the shoots that like are specifically for a woman to give to a husband for their wedding day. Because I realized that like the core of why I do this kind of work is because I want women to feel, or just people in general, like I do men also. But it's like, I want them to feel like inherently safe and comfortable in their sexuality and like in their body and in like being sexy by themselves. And so, yeah, it's like they come in and they're like, okay, I'm going to give this, or like, I'm going to show this. And I'm like, no, we're just actually showing you. Yeah. Like, you're not performing, like you said, you're just being. And that is beautiful and sexy.
Yeah. And I mean, and in the world of like, you know, purity culture and church upbringing, like women especially are told your sexuality is not for you, right? Like your sexuality is always linked to how it affects somebody else. And it is always linked to shame. And so this idea of like getting boudoir photos taken just for you, like feels foreign probably to a lot of people, especially in our area that's like oversaturated with Christians or past Christians. And so it's like that whole concept is totally like overlooked within Christian faith. And I think in general too, like in our culture at large, it's been so influenced by Christianity and Christian values that, you know, being sexy for example, the Kardashians, very sexy family, right? But it's the idea that like, oh, they are on these magazine covers or whatever for other people, you know, or like they are, you know, keeping their bodies a certain way for XYZ, for their husbands or for their, you know, reputation on their TV show, whatever. But like, what if it's just for them?
Right. Well, and that's kind of the piece of it there is like we're taught, or women especially are taught, like your sexuality is only meant for your marriage, right? Like it is this special thing outside of yourself that you get to share between you and your husband when someday you get married, if you get married. And that sort of separates sexuality from ourselves in a way. It's sort of this like other thing that's away from us and not necessarily part of us. And then the second part to that is any expression of sexuality outside of that like context is seen as having evil ulterior motives, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh,
To
you're being
seduce.
sexy, like you want attention, or you're seducing someone, or you are causing someone to stumble, or, you know, you are not okay inside and, you know, looking for worth in the wrong
compensating.
places or whatever, as opposed to like the expression of sexuality being seen as a part of the human experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like thinking back actually to, because I did the typical Christian girl thing and I did a boudoir. Whoa, I can't even say the word. How do you
Boudoir?
say it? Boudoir. Thank you. I have
Maybe, I don't
about
know.
4
I'm not
different
French.
ways that I say it and I just rotate through it.
Honestly, same.
Booter.
A boudoir. But I did that before I got married.
Is that a typical Christian thing to do?
I feel like
It's
it's
a
like
lot
a
of
spicy
Christians-
Christian thing.
it's it's like a
If you're feeling
pushing
a little
It's like the
spicy.
progressive
Oh.
Christian girls do a boudoir
Yeah.
photo shoot before they get married. Yeah.
Wow. The only person I've ever known who's done that before their wedding that told me about it at least was you.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. I feel like I know like a handful of
It's like a
gals that
secret
have done
thing because
it.
they're not going to show anyone except for their husband.
Sure.
Yeah,
Although you've
for
shown
sure.
them to us.
Really?
Yeah, at least some of
I
them.
don't think I've seen
How
that.
could- like a year and a half ago.
I can show
wow.
you guys.
I remember we
after-
sat on her
yeah,
bed and we
we're
like
done
looked
Definitely
at them.
want to see them.
Yeah, they're beautiful. And so I did that thing, but I remember feeling like I needed an excuse to do it. Like, let's get real. I wanted to do it. James did not care if I gave him pictures or not. He's literally like, whatever. Like, my
He's
husband
like, I can
is
just see you.
he's so
Literally.
chill. And I just wanted to do it for me, but I felt like I needed a reason. And that reason was I was making a book to give to my husband before our wedding day. And like he literally just, he's like, thank you. This is thoughtful and nice. But I actually don't really care. Like
That's classic James right there. Oh my
classic
gosh.
James. And he was like trying to be nice, but he was just like, I get to like be in bed with you tomorrow. Like, what is this like
Right.
picture? Anyway, but like my point is, it feels like in Christianity, purity culture, whatever, you need a reason, and it can't be for you. It can't be for
It's
enjoying
always that
you.
like awkward conversation that I have with people where I'll say like, "Oh yeah, I'm a boudoir photographer." I'm a boudoir
Can't say either of
photographer.
the words.
And then they'll be like, "Oh yeah, I've always wanted to do that. Like maybe one day when I'm getting married." And I said, "Why not now?"
Yeah.
And then it's just like an awkward silence.
Yeah.
And they don't have a full reason necessarily. They're just like, "Oh, wait." They're just like have a moment, and I'm like,
Yeah.
"You could do it now."
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's just like an awkward in between of like, are you giving me permission? Like almost like they're asking for that like permission from someone.
Right.
And it's like, no, you can literally like, you don't have to give anything to a man.
Yeah.
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 Like we're not like it's that performative side of things where it's like, actually, no, inherently us as humans are sexual beings.
Yeah.
You don't have to have a reason.
Yeah.
Being human
Yeah.
is reason enough.
And like you doing something that you've always wanted to do, if someone's saying, I've always wanted to have boudoir photos taken, why would you hold that off until you are then in a relationship with someone to give them to, you know? Like, why not just do that thing now?
Right.
Like, I hear, I've ranted about this before on the podcast and other episodes that we've done about like singleness and different things. But the idea of like holding things off for when you're married really frustrates me in general, because it's this idea that like your life doesn't start until you're married, and there's so much life to live. And I've like watched people pass up great opportunities to do fun or exciting things or to move to a new place or whatever, because they're like, well, I'll wait until I'm married to some theoretical person that doesn't even exist in your life yet.
No, that idea, and then also like the way that married couples are instantly elevated in church communities above single people. Yeah, that's something I could rant about for like, that's a tangent. But yeah, and I think also going back is like, it's very cultural to be taught that like our sexuality should be hidden, because in other cultures, like if you just take it back to like modesty, for example, like in some countries it's like very modest to like only show your ankles. Like you can't show anything but the ankles. But then in other countries, it's like they wear like basically nothing, and that's considered modest.
Yeah.
And so it's like, what within the like church world or just America is teaching us that like this photo is immodest.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember in high school I had a friend who's Indian, and I saw her in her what's the word? Sorry. And like that shows your stomach. And like in high school at that time, it wasn't like popular like it is to wear crop tops right now. And so I was like, and I was much more like Christianly modest at that time. And so in my mind, it was like, oh my gosh, she's showing her stomach. But I was also like, but this is also like very culturally normal for her to show her stomach. And I'm not seeing any of my friends' stomachs, but I see her stomach because she's in her sari.
That is basically the whole idea of it in my mind, is like, I just love not pushing people's buttons, but also just like, I question things because I'm like, I want answers. Like I ask questions all the time. And so when someone's like, oh, you can't do that, I'm like, okay, why?
Yeah.
I'm going to need a why.
Yeah.
Like if you give me a good why, then I'll listen. But if you don't give me a good why, I probably will not listen. That idea of like, okay, well, like you can't wear a short skirt to church. Like why not?
Yeah.
Like, what's wrong with my legs?
God knows what my legs look like.
God loves my whole body. What do you mean? Yeah. Like, what is this? And so just when it's always put on like, oh, well, you can't show cleavage because of like the men in the church. To me, that sounds like a man issue.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound like
their problem.
It doesn't sound like a me issue, right?
Yeah.
And so just kind of pushing those buttons of like, well, why can I not do this? And like, this is just my body, and this is just me being me in my body. Like, why is this bad? Nobody can give me a clear answer, I found, where it's like, okay, well, why does the Bible say I can't? And it's like, oh, well, like,
it's like, where does that actually show up in the Bible?
Right.
Again?
Or it's just like something that they kind of like made for their own sermon, or just like different interpretations or whatever. And I'm just like, you actually can't give me a clear reason. And all I know is that like I'm supposed to celebrate and love my body.
Yeah. And I feel like in general, there's so much that people just sort of like repeat and regurgitate. And so when you ask why, it hits a wall, because people are repeating things that people who sound authoritative or seem like they know what they're talking about have said, and rather than like critically thinking and gaining understanding for themselves of like why they would actually believe something, you know?
Right.
I've actually been reflecting on that lately, like literally as of 2 days ago. I was thinking about the fact that like leadership in the church is how well you are able to regurgitate the information that you've learned. It's not like how well have you grasped the concepts internally, and how have you like, sifted through a sea of varying perspectives and come to your own conclusion. It's how, especially if you're a man, how well can you take what the pastor said, spin it your own way, and regurgitate it authoritatively is considered success, and it's considered like leadership, and it's considered good teaching. But we don't have a good value for that sort of like in-depth study, research, wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
Like the church does not value wrestling at all. And leadership is, my understanding of leadership as I've been going through a deconstruction process is changing as I'm reconsidering what that means.
I think just to harken back a little bit to what Ellie said a little bit earlier is it's kind of like sitting in my brain and like rolling around the idea of like demonizing the self and like demonizing the enjoyment of the self. And that personally, that feels very apparent in purity culture. And it's like, your body is not your own. You should not be enjoying it, basically. And I think that pops up a lot in things across the Christian experience, but specifically when it comes to something like, oh, well, I'm going to take naked pictures for me. And it's like, people are like, you're making porn? And I'm like, no.
But what if I was?
I am like cherishing what I've been given and like enjoying and being in it. And I think that's really powerful.
Well, and like people are so concerned, right?
Yeah.
Like people are so concerned with what you're doing with your body and the idea that you would take photos of yourself in a sexual way for you is like, oh no. But it's like, why does this affect you in any way? Like, it's just like how I brush my teeth for me, like every day for my own personal health.
Or I work out for me.
Yeah.
Taking it back to like a deeper issue, I guess, is it just historically, like putting blame and modesty and like shame on women's bodies has just been a way to control women.
For sure.
And so specifically within like church communities, it's like they don't like a fully like actualized and like confident and secure woman is really powerful. I was watching a documentary recently for one of my classes and it's like actually hundreds of years ago within like church communities, like sex and sexuality and women's bodies were just celebrated. And it was just like as Christianity like continued on, it was just like, okay, actually, like, let's put this to, like, only be in marriage. Or, like, let's put this to be hidden away. Because, like, actually, how can we control the people and get them to do, like, what we want them to do?
Interesting.
Well, I was curious, too, because you had mentioned a little bit earlier this idea of self-portraiture. And I'd love to hear kind of your process. Like, first of all, what have you learned about yourself in photographing yourself in that way? And how has that helped you photograph other women as well?
Yeah. So I think most of my life I've been in a mixture of purity culture mixed with, like I had a lot of health issues growing up. I felt very disconnected from my body. And so it was always like this weird dynamic of like, don't let anyone touch your body, but let the doctors touch your body, but don't show people this part of your body, but actually those doctors can see it. And just like a weird back and forth of like, I actually just became so like dissociated from myself that it was like, that's a body. This is me. And it was like two completely separate parts. And I don't think I fully realized that until later when I was just like in different times of my life. And it's like, oh, can you pinpoint like what you're feeling here? And I'm like, no, I can't. Like I don't know what I look like even. And so as I was doing this and just realizing that like I don't actually have people that will let me photograph them, I was like, okay, I'll just do my own photos. And so I just became practicing and setting up different things. And I was like, I would look at a photo and legitimately not see myself. I'd be like, okay, yeah, that's a great photo. And like that person looks good, but it's not me. And so it just became this like, I realized that it was like a slightly deeper journey than I had expected. And I was like, okay, actually, no, we're going to like learn like who you are and what you look like. And so it became like that kind of thing of just messing with like myself in different ways or like feeling sexy, but then like showing myself that actually that is you and you do look good. And like these in-between shots that we get, like you still look good then. Like this is just your body. And kind of just that experience of like just literally gathering information and just like that is what you look like. That is straight up what you look like. And I actually had an experience recently where, like, a lot of my own, like, photos I took, or my brother took, because he's a photographer also. And I realized that that's not actually as vulnerable as I thought it was. So, because it's just me or my brother that I've known my whole life. And I still get to control it.
Sure.
And so I was always under the impression of, like, look, I'm posting photos of myself, so you should be confident to do the same thing because I did it. And I was like, actually, no, that's just me by myself. And so I had a friend recently that is a photographer, and I asked him to do, like, a few boudoir type photos for me. And I realized, like, standing there, I was like, oh, this is what people are feeling. Like, this is, like, I thought that I knew, but I didn't know kind of thing. And I was like, oh, this actually does feel very vulnerable to, like, give control of, like, what I feel and, like, what I think I look like, and, like, literally to just try to be sexy or, like, look good in front of someone else. I think it really has just, like, simply shown me myself. It's helped me to, like, connect mind to body. So, like, not only just simply what I look like, but just, like, putting back, like, no, I have to be in my body, I have to feel this way myself, and I have to, like, learn me. And it's like been a huge part of, like, how I've connected back my head, like, my mind to my body.
Yeah.
And, like, gotten rid of that, like, hardcore dissociated state. And it's like, I think people just don't realize that point of it, where I'm like, we're just taught growing up in purity culture that, like, your body's not yours. Simply. It's like a woman's body is either, like, sexual in a bad way, or it's your husband's. And so it's like, actually, no, this is my body. This is what I'm living with for my whole life. And, like, I deserve and should get to know it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that you're at such a, like, a collision of different messages with purity culture messaging, and then, like, also having, like, health issues, and that when I've had health issues in the past, like, it feels like my body is betraying me, you know? And, like, so we're told by a church, like, your body is bad, your body is sinful, your body is dangerous, and then our body is telling us as it betrays us, like, I'm actually not going to show up for you, you know, or, like, I'm not going to do the things that you thought that I could do before. And I think similar to, like, the way that photography has been, like, redemptive to you in that sense, like, when my body was failing me, it was like, okay, I'm going to climb this mountain, or I'm going to, like, start rock climbing. And, like, it was, like, very emotional to do those things and to, like, try to trust my body. And it still is at times, because it's like, oh, my body has failed me before. Like, what if my hands just, like, give out while I'm climbing this wall? Or, like, what if, like, I just, like, I can't, like, it's been, like, rebuilding trust. And, like, you're, like, rebuilding your image of yourself and, like, who you are and what it means to be connected to you, because, like, your body didn't betray you, really. Like, your body is part of you, is with you. And learning how to, like, embrace that again is rough, along with all of the purity culture messaging at the same time.
Oh, yeah. It's like, yeah, it's that idea of, like, my whole life being taught that, like, your body is something that you should be ashamed of and that you should hide. And then having that, like, oh, I can't actually trust that my body's going to work right now. Like, it's just falling apart. It's causing pain. It's not working. And it's just like, okay, my body is just simply bad? Question mark. Like, that's
like,
what
I was told by the church it was bad, and now it's bad because it's not working properly.
And so then it's, like, just a mixture of, like, all that messaging is just, and then just going through, like, hardcore eating disorders through high school, and just, like, trying to make my body look like what I thought people wanted it to look like, but then being told that I can't let people see it. But then it's just, like, just confusing. For, like, a young person, just being like, what do I do with this body? Like, I'm just trying to live my life here, but what do I do?
Totally.
And so, like, and because a lot of my work too is like, yeah, I want people to, I've found that there's a lot of people who are like okay with like, okay, well, we're just celebrating the body. Like it's gonna be like a natural, we're celebrating the human form. But then and like that's their way of stepping out of purity culture. But I'm like, so I try not to like fully go that direction because I'm like, no, but you also are a sexual human and you're allowed to be sexual. Yeah. So I don't want to discount that. Yeah. But I do love just like celebrating that it's just a body. Because I'm like, okay, actually, no, my body's still here. Mm-hmm. It's like still surviving. Like we're doing good. Yeah. And so I'm like, I want to like just celebrate the like human form. Like it's kept me alive through this whole time. Yeah. And so kind of just like using that to not only be like, okay, actually, no, this is just me like thanking my body right now. Mm-hmm. This is me like celebrating that it survived all that. Mm-hmm. And that it like is still for me. Like my body is for me. Yeah. And so like just kind of mixing all that where it's like just keeping both sides. Like you are sexy and you are sexual just inherently. And that's not a bad thing. But also just like, this is also just my body.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think that it can swing to like the opposite extreme as people try to maybe reject purity culture. They're like, no, like this is the idea of like, this is quote unquote just a body. Mm-hmm. To me, that's just objectifying, but in a different, from a different lens, like with different words. Like you're still objectifying because you're not recognizing the personhood of that body. Mm-hmm. You're not recognizing the humanity. And so like finding that balance and that tension of like, yes, this is a body and a body is a body. Like that is a neutral statement. It doesn't have to be bad or good or whatever. But at the same time, this body also is a human with, you know, a soul and a sexuality and desires and all of these things that come wrapped up in it. It's not simply a body, but it is also a body, period.
Right. And I think like I've been like on that line of trying to figure out like what that means to me. And so like a lot of my work was like, okay, I'm going to do like lingerie. We're trying to be sexy, like make myself feel really powerful. But then I found that like, oh, the days that I felt bad about myself, I like wouldn't do as much like photography. And I was like, okay, that ruins my point. Like, isn't this like against what I've been saying? And so some of my favorite photos I took of myself were from a day when I felt like extremely bloated, like really disgusting. I was on my period and I was just wearing like huge granny panties. And literally it's just photos of me in my studio, like in my granny panties on my period, bloated. And I was like, these actually, they make me like love my body more than half of my other photos where I feel like I look sexy and good. Because I'm like, no, that's actually just like, that's my body doing what it's meant to do. And like, that's my body just, I don't know, just being in its most inherent, like, woman self.
You're on your period. That is super sexy. A body operating properly. Like, that is sexy.
Super sexy.
It is.
True.
We're like, it is.
And that just, like, speaks to what a tool it is for self-compassion. Because I've had my own health journey the past, like, year or so. And anytime I either have pictures taken of me or I take pictures, I'm just constantly like, wow, like I am so beautiful. And like it reinforces that self-compassion and that like, wow, this is what my body does and it's good and it's whole. And even though it might not be working the way that I want it to, or maybe the quote unquote ideal way right now, it's still, those things do not take away from the goodness or the compassion I should have towards myself. And so I love that idea of like, I'm not trying to be super sexy right now. I'm just being, and that's good enough.
And that's also sexy.
And that is also sexy.
Yeah. So I was curious, because inevitably, even as centered as you can become in your own life, people for sure still have opinions. And there's still there's still societal expectations about how you're supposed to present, like supposed to be in quotations. And so how do you choose like what to post? How do you share your art with the world, knowing that once it's out there, it's open to interpretation and
criticism.
And criticism, and in a sense, it kind of like you lose control of it.
Yeah. It kind of, that like part of me has kind of grown or changed over the years. Because at first I was like nervous. I was like, am I going to get in trouble?
Yeah.
Like I'm an adult, but am I going to get in trouble like for posting this?
Yeah.
But I just started because I was like, I can't actually ask anyone to do something that I wouldn't do.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of my mindset. And so I started with just like, okay, I'll post these photos of me. And I started with just more like conservative ones, but I'm like, that's actually not what people want to see. Like not in like they want to see my naked body,
Mm-hmm.
but like they want to take the photos that I have taken that I just haven't posted.
Mm.
And so I'm like, okay, no, actually, like if I'm going to sit here and believe that like I am a sexual being and I'm allowed to be this way, then I'm going to let people see it.
Mm.
And so, like, I was just kind of gave up all my cares. And I was just like, I'll post whatever the heck I want to post.
Yeah.
And I've had so many people unfollow me, ask if I'm doing okay. Like, that kind of vibe of just like, oh, like, are you all right? Are you looking for attention? You must be depressed.
Yeah.
All this stuff. But I'm like, the amount of comments I've gotten of, hey, actually, I didn't hate my body today because of what you posted the other day.
Mm.
Mm.
Like
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
That's
I'm like,
so worth
okay,
it.
So good.
that I don't care what the pastor told me
Right.
after I got that comment.
Oh,
Yeah.
You know?
how
I'm like,
problematic though.
right.
I've been praying for you.
Like,
Oh my
are you
gosh.
okay? You must
Literally.
be like going through some daddy wounds.
Like,
Like,
literally.
Literally, stay out of my business.
stay up.
Right. But yeah, no, I'm like, people will follow your lead kind of thing. Where it's like, oh no, they see that like it's okay that you did it, so I can do it.
Mm.
Kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I have always just kind of been the one to like not really care what people think.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm like, I will do what I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
There is something incredibly powerful about that. Like friends or sisters who go before you and like in their moving forward give you permission
Mm-hmm.
to believe for yourself
Yeah.
or to take that for yourself too. And so I feel like as women are stepping into the fullness of themselves, they're actually opening up space for other women to do the same.
Yeah.
And it does feel very empowering.
Yeah. It's so cool too, because it's like what you said about like asking permission. And it's that same kind of idea of like, well, I've seen my sister or my friend or whoever do X.
Yeah.
And that automatically gives me permission. And I feel like maybe as women, maybe as Christians, I don't know. But there is this attitude of like asking permission, asking to take up space, asking to show up, asking for XYZ. And I'm like, what if I just took that?
That's kind of what I've done of just like, actually, if we take it back to extreme step backs, like I know a million Christian men that will post bathing suit photos, shirtless photos.
Yeah.
What's the difference?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just those kind of things where it's like, okay, like I'm just simply posting the same thing you are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's just that kind of idea that people just won't say,
Mm-hmm.
where I'm like, can you explain the difference to me right now?
Right.
And they can't.
Yep.
And it's that idea of like, I just do it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I'm just going to do it. And if you don't like it, I don't care.
Yeah. Don't look.
Don't, right. Just unfollow
You
me.
don't like
Which
it,
thing
don't
I've
look at
done.
Yeah, but I mean that's very real. Even I would say even like if a woman posts a photo in a bathing suit, it's more acceptable than the kind of photography that you're doing.
Yeah.
Even though it's like the same amount of skin that's being shown. Like I've posted like bathing suit photos and don't get, you know, family members asking my mom if I'm okay. But I post photos of us in our underwear and I'm asked, well, my mom is asked if I'm okay by family members.
There's just
because-
something like inherently like we're taught that inherently our underwear is shameful.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
In my like logical brain, I'm like, this doesn't add up.
Yeah.
Like you can't. Yeah, people are just like not afraid to post a bikini photo, but then it's like, oh, the moment it has lace on it, that is of the devil.
Yeah.
Like, right.
Get
Any
rid of
straps,
that.
no straps.
Yeah,
No
right.
straps, no lace.
It's just like it's just back to that like it's shameful to be sexual. And I'm like, okay, can we just realize that if there was no sex, there'd be no humans? Like,
Literally.
Yeah.
like if this is just inherently what we were made to do, simply.
Yeah.
And it's just like you can't have me as a woman if you don't take my sexual side also.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
kind of what I've come to of just like this is all of me. Because I've also had just guys that I was like interested in be like, actually this is too much, or like I actually like I feel offended that you would post a photo like that. I'm like, then simply you don't first of all understand me.
Yep.
Or
Go find
this won't
something
work.
less.
Literally,
You
I was
know
like,
what?
sounds like you need something less, bud.
Right. It's just that kind of idea of like this, like if you don't see the art and you don't see the humanity in me and my photography,
You're missing
then
it.
I'm good.
Yeah.
I don't want you.
Yeah.
Like I don't
Yeah.
need you. Like that's kind of how it is for a lot of people where they're like, I had to unfollow you because of XYZ, and I'm like, okay, I don't care.
The idea,
Yeah.
though, that they feel like compelled to come tell you,
Right.
I had to unfollow you because.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
we're associating underwear pictures with like acting out, and that's
Right.
offensive to people. It's like, sorry, you just like are living some weird sheltered bubble life that I'm like not interested in.
Right.
Think so. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm actually curious, do you find that like, you know, if you were like talking to someone that you're interested in or in like the dating sphere, having these images out there, do you feel like that like affects things a lot, or do you feel like how
feel
does
like-
that play in?
I feel like it just shows me who is a man versus who is a boy.
Oh, she went there.
I mean, it's like the people that have been like offended or scared or whatever, it's
Yeah.
just their weird sense of control. They feel like they can't control me as a woman.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm not gonna enter a
face right
relationship
now.
where I'm gonna be controlled by a man.
Yeah. Yeah.
Simply put.
It's a good filter in a way.
It really is, because
Yeah.
like the people that I've like either been friends with or like have dated a little bit or whatever are the people that are like, no, I actually like value and appreciate the confidence you have
Yeah.
and like what you're doing, and I see your art. And it's not like, oh my gosh, I would never date a girl that posts half naked photos. And I'm like, why?
Yeah.
You post shirtless photos all the time.
Yeah.
Like back to that.
And they don't think twice about it either.
Right.
They're not
Yeah.
asking anyone for permission. They're not
Yeah.
worried like, oh, but someone might think of it this way. It's
Right.
like,
I'm like, no, the person that I'm with is gonna like love to show me off. Not
Yeah.
gonna like try to make me smaller
Mm-hmm.
and control me.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I just see it as like a simple, quick way to weed people out.
Yeah.
Or if they can't like understand the like heart and like art behind it kind of thing, where it's like, because there is like some people that are just like, oh, well, you're just like posting thirst traps. You're just trying to do whatever. And first of all, I'm like, what if I was?
Yeah.
what's wrong with that?
Like, just get over it.
Yeah.
Second of all, like, this is my job, this is my work, and like it still offends you, and that's the problem. Like, that's what I'm trying to stop.
Yeah.
Is like,
You're like,
the
I'm
fact
trying
that
to
it-
break stigma and you are the stigma.
Right.
now.
I'm like, you're literally showing me why I'm doing this right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
Like,
So thank you.
right.
Actually.
For another
Proof is in the
example.
poison, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Right.
Yeah.
You right here telling me
And
that I'm
it's-
too much. For
Yeah. And it kind of has just like mixed in with my feminism and just been like, okay, well, no, I'm going to like show you that I'm on my period right now. Like, I'm going to show you or like tell you, like everybody around me always knows when I'm on my period. And like, I'm going to show you like, this is just my body, how it is. I refuse to retouch photos. Like people will be like, oh, I've got like acne here. And I'm like, I simply won't take it off. Sorry.
Yeah.
But like just that kind of thing where it's like, I'm photographing you. The end. Like, I'm not photographing what you wish you were. I'm not photographing, like, what the world wishes you looked like. I'm photographing you, and I'm showing you that you're beautiful.
Yeah. So I feel like we've touched on this a little bit, but I'm curious if you've seen maybe just like a common thread into like why people get upset about your photos, or like why someone might be offended by the work that you do. Like, what do you see as some of the roots?
The roots. With women, I found that it's because they don't like themselves. It, in all the conversations, like if it's become a conversation, it's gotten down to like, well, I would never feel comfortable doing that. And so it's more so like a not instant, like, I hate you for doing that, like kind of vibe. It's just like, they wish they could. And I'm like, you can. But it's never like, I found that from the women, it's typically like a, or more like a jealousy of like, I wish I felt like I was allowed to. And it's like the people that are typically like either in really conservative marriages or like in the church a lot or like in whatever, and they're just like, I'm not allowed to.
Yeah, they're being controlled.
Like the amount of times I've heard like, oh, I'd love to do that, but like I wouldn't be allowed to post those. And I'm like, wouldn't be allowed?
Yeah.
Who's telling you that?
Who is saying that? And just that kind of vibe. And from the men, it's the idea of, I don't feel like I can control you right now.
Yeah.
It's like, if she's going to post that, what else will she do? Like, in that vibe of just like, oh, you're not just like a small hidden little thing that like only I get to see, or like just that kind of vibe. And it's more just like, oh, you feel like a little out of control right now. And so it literally just, to me, just feels like control.
Yeah. And
where
both
like,
of them come back to control.
Yeah. And it's like, they're just scared of someone not having shame. I don't know.
Well, there's like a possessiveness to it as well. Like this idea that, oh, you belong to me, and therefore I get to decide what of you gets shared with the world and what doesn't. Where in actuality, like, no one belongs to anybody.
Right.
Literally.
We're our own independent humans. And in things where there's a relationship, whether it's friendship, all the way up to marriage, like nobody owns anybody.
Yeah. You might be like, partnered with somebody, like you're collaborating with somebody.
You're linking arms.
Yeah. You're like sharing life.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, the person's decision regarding their own body is their decision. And you can like get in line or move along.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, like when you talk about women's reactions often being like, well, I could never do that. I think that a lot of people especially Christians, get upset when they see people doing things that their Christian upbringing has told them that they cannot do. Because it's like this idea of like, at least in my mind, it's you're walking in this freedom that I don't get to walk in, and like that's not allowed, essentially. Like you have this level of liberty, and that's not okay because I don't get that level of liberty. And it's not necessarily, conscious that they're thinking that, but that tends to be a lot of the I think a lot of the like hidden rhetoric behind that. Even when you see like Christian reactions to like the LGBT community, it's like there's so much freedom and liberation that happens as people embrace their sexuality. And Christians who have been sexually suppressed and repressed for many, many decades are like, oh no, you can't do that because I can't do that.
Right.
And it's also just that whole idea of like holding people to a standard that you're holding yourself to when like why on earth would that be their standard as well?
Yeah.
And I think it's also like specifically within like church worlds, it's like they want, if you start questioning one thing, you question everything. Like you can't.
A slippery slope.
And so I think they're like, it's the same way that a lot of Christians just don't don't know or like don't have answers for that because it doesn't affect them. And so it's like it feels comfortable to have like a man telling you what you should be wearing and what you should be doing.
It totally does.
And so it's like, it's not just like ignoring that fact. It's like, no, some people just want to stay in their comfortability of like being told what's safe and what's good. And so for them to be like, oh, actually, maybe I am allowed to do that, it kind of just crumbles their whole world.
It's true.
And so they're like, I actually can't look at that. I can't even consider that.
Yeah.
Because everything else would come crashing down.
Totally. I know exactly what you're talking about, because then you're forced to use your brain and also accept responsibility and consequences for whatever. And God forbid you make the quote unquote wrong choice. It's like, it like paralyzes women, I think. And what you were saying earlier just like makes me think back to my Victoria's Secret days. And like I became very instantly the hype woman. It was my job to make you feel good in my fitting room. And like seeing the mass, like truly it's just body dysmorphia with amongst women was shocking. And then women apologizing for things like, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm not wearing makeup today. I'm like, girl, I do not give two shits if you're wearing makeup or not today. We're going to make you feel good. Like, that's the goal. And I think, like, I mean, we've been saying it basically this whole episode, but women don't know how to feel good in their bodies. And that was, like, my goal. It's like, I'm here to help you feel good and feel confident and feel comfortable. And that is my only objective. I don't care what you buy today. That's not my problem. Like, I'm here to help you embrace who you are as a woman. And I think we don't do that as a society. Like, we don't know how.
Yeah, and it's, yeah, that's, I have like a little spiel that I do every time someone like comes to a shoot with me. And I'm like, okay, like, for one, I ask them what they're insecure about because I'm like, I don't want to highlight something. Like, I just want to know.
Sure.
So that I don't like accidentally like highlight a key thing that's going to trigger you. But also I'm just like, but I also have seen a ton of bodies and I'm not scared of bodies and I love all bodies. And so I'm like, you're not going to like do something or look a certain way that's going to make me think differently of you or treat you differently or think that you're not beautiful. Like, you literally could do nothing right now. Because I'm like, and then I also am just like, you can be like dressed or undressed to whatever you want. Because they also come in where like half of them are like really would love to do like a full topless photo, but are like, no, but you don't want to see that. And I'm like, you're literally
like, you know what I do?
Do you know what I do for a living? Like this, like I'm comfortable to where you're comfortable kind of vibe. And it's just like me being the one to be like, no, like I'm not afraid of your body.
Yeah.
Gives them like a small space to be like, maybe I'm not afraid of my body right now.
Yeah, I think that people also just get so wrapped up in like concern for other people's judgments of their bodies. A small example I think of, actually, I talked to someone the other day who got a pedicure and she hadn't shaved her legs in a long time. And so her legs were really hairy. And she was like very self-conscious because the person giving her the pedicure saw her hairy legs and like touched her hairy legs. And I was like, so? Like as she's saying, I'm like, everyone has it. Like, it's not a surprise. And also this person who's giving you a pedicure has seen a million hairy legs, I'm sure. Like, that's not going to faze them. And I think that generally a lot of people are not as concerned with judging your body as we tend to be with like making sure our bodies don't get judged. I think that an exception is probably when it comes to like the Christian church, because there is a lot of concern with regulating bodies within that sphere. But like, I just hear so many people with that idea of like someone who literally works with bodies, like a boudoir photographer or a like nail specialist, nail technician, or a waxer or whatever. Like, these people have seen bodies, or doctors too. Like, you know, it's this idea that like we'll start to feel insecure about very natural, normal things about our bodies, and then apologize to our bra specialist at Victoria's Secret because our boobs look a certain way or because we're not wearing makeup. And it's so bizarre because why would that even be their concern?
It's
like, that's
so
not what they're
weird.
there for.
It also just blows my mind how, like, purity culture has also made women just not know what their body looks like at all, but in the sense of they don't know what bodies look like. And so if something, like, if they happen to have seen a body on a magazine or seen porn or seen something, they expect, like, okay, all bodies look like that. And so it becomes more of an issue of, like, you're creating body dysmorphia and, like, women hating their bodies because they don't know what bodies are supposed to look like.
Well, and marketing has capitalized on the fact that we are dissociated from our bodies.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, you don't know what a body looks like? This is what I'm going to tell you it looks like. Aspire to be like this.
Yeah.
If you buy our products, you could look like this and feel like this. When if we were actually more associated with what bodies really look like, we'd be a lot more critical.
Yes.
But I think that that's changing and we are becoming more critical, but we have allowed marketing companies to determine beauty
for sure,
rather than
and
being
the industry, and like,
rather than just being
et cetera,
acquainted
et cetera.
with what beauty is in our world. Like, we're so not present
And that's even
with
on,
what we
like,
look like.
not just women for themselves, but men.
Yeah,
Christian
for sure.
men who,
Men
like,
as well.
specifically Christian men who have never experienced a naked woman until their wedding day,
Yeah.
but probably most likely have been addicted to porn their whole life.
Yeah.
Like, they just look at their wife's body on their wedding day and they're like, that's not what I expected. And so it's like a double-ended sword of, like,
It's not good.
the woman doesn't like themselves, the man is not expecting what a real woman's body should look like.
and
it's
what a real
just,
sexual experience should look like.
Oh, literally, yes.
like, the amount of, like, that part of purity culture just gets me going. Like, you just, like, destroy all thoughts of a woman being sexual, and then on her wedding day, you're like, okay, now be the best sexual experience for your husband ever.
and be great at this thing you've literally never done.
Yeah.
or even talked about, or considered.
Yeah.
And then, like the amount of Christian women I know that, like, had horrible sex lives for a long time because they just were so filled with shame and hatred to their body that I'm like,
Breaks my heart.
this is not what God...
And then,
what God
unfortunately,
created.
all the women that they know in their circle are also having horrible sex
Right.
lives. And so then they think, oh, horrible sex life is normal. And this is the life
Yeah.
that
Sex just sucks.
Sex just sucks.
It's
Bummer. I guess I'll do it so I can have kids. And that's the
heartbreaking.
end.
Yeah.
Like, it literally is so heartbreaking to me that, like, women don't know, or at least a good percentage of women don't know that sex should be enjoyable and fun for them.
yeah.
It's literally just man using woman's body.
Literally. Also,
For their pleasure.
there's a magical little button called the clitoris, and it's fabulous. Like, get on that, girl. And so I just, I don't have a point. It's just really sad.
I'm just sad.
I'm so sad. And also, like, obviously your body is special, but your body is not so special, most likely, that a doctor or a bra specialist or a nail technician or a photographer or fill in the blank is going to go home and think about your body the rest of their day.
Yeah.
They're not going to be like, oh my God, that vagina. Nope,
Yeah.
it's
Or
just
that
a
hairy leg.
It's
Like,
just a vagina. Or, oh my God, those boobs. I remember
Yeah.
one pair of boobs. They were 93 years old. That's all. I have measured thousands of boobs in my life. Like, guys, they're all probably really, really normal and very much so similar, but also different. But like, I don't, like, no one's going to remember your insecurity. And I think that's what, like, is so messed up, again, about that mass body dysmorphia of, like, no one remembers your insecurity.
yeah.
Now that you're saying
everyone
that-
else is busy being insecure about themselves.
I used to have, like, dreams of being, like, naked in front of my entire high school or, like, people, you know, like, I used to have, like, scary dreams where, like, suddenly I'm exposed and they can see my pube hair and, you know, you know, whatever. They see my hairy legs and my vagina and all this stuff and they go home being like, oh my God, can you believe what she looked like? Or whatever. And I look back and I'm like, oh, that's so dumb. But I think in a way we all sort of, not all of us, but so many people kind of walk around with that idea that, like, something about me is not perfect and therefore I am outside the norm, and if I were to be exposed, I would be the laughingstock or whatever.
When like really even the images that we see are already not truthful, right?
Yes,
like,
but we don't know that.
Yeah, but like, I mean, I think about that, like, since I'm in, the media industry, like, I see and have seen, models or actresses or whatever who look so stunning and so idealized once they've been captured, but as we're like on set, I see their like random roles that they have, or the cellulite or stretch marks that they have, or the time where their makeup is not quite on point and they have to fix it, or their hair is doing a weird thing. Like all these things that we're like, oh my gosh, I can't do that because the model on the cover of the magazine doesn't look like that.
Right.
But this is 1 second of that model's day that you're seeing.
I tell people all the
retouching.
time, I'm like, the people that you think are the most beautiful models in the whole world, I have bad photos of them.
Yeah. And I literally froze on a really bad freeze frame of a video of a model yesterday
most beautiful woman.
who was just absolutely stunning.
Yeah.
But the freeze frame was hilariously ugly.
Because everyone's like, no, I don't photograph well. Like, you're not going to get good photos of me. Like, not like that girl. She looks beautiful. And I'm like, it's my job to get the good photo.
Yeah.
Like,
Like,
I
that girl's got some bad photos too.
Yeah,
trust me.
you're all capable of being that girl, know?
So Ellie, wow. I mean, just all good things, right? Like we've covered so many things, but what I'm particularly curious about is how have you found your own voice in the process of photographing yourself and other women? Because I feel like self-portrait really has a ton of power in that vein, and I'm curious to hear your experience of that.
It just kind of helped me to connect to myself. And it kind of just it helps me to like center around what I feel like my identity is. And just kind of being like, okay, this is me. And just all sides of me, and like not just what I look like, but what I want to portray, like the type of person I want to portray to the world, and like show kind of, I don't know. It's like, because I do get the people that misunderstand. Obviously, they look at it and they're like, oh, that's just a girl that posts half naked photos. And they don't see it. But
Yeah.
I've had more people see the side of like, oh, I actually just see like a calmness, a peace, and like a centered confidence around you, and just how I act. I'm like, it's made me more confident just in my body and everyday life. Like, I wear things I would never have considered wearing before. I like just it's a little bit different in your everyday life when you're like, the internet has seen me in my underwear.
For sure.
And so it's like, no, actually I have a confidence that like I know that I look good. Like, I know that was just like a photo that captured the one specific moment, and my body doesn't look like that at all times, but it can. Like, it did look like that. And so it kind of just gives like an interesting confidence of like, well, if I can do that, if I can post my naked body on the internet, why can't I do these other things? Kind of vibe where it's like, specifically in this town and in Christian worlds, I'm off the deep end. Like, after posting that, I am just a heathen.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And so,
Prodigal son coming home.
right. And so I've kind of already like pushed past whatever standards, or I've scared enough people.
Yeah.
I mean, in a sense, you sort of like knocked down the things that you were formerly able to hide behind.
Right.
And so there's a vulnerability there where it's like, well, you've kind of already seen it, so I can't really hide behind it anymore, but also I don't have to hide it anymore. Like, there's a liberation
and
there
it's
as
kind
well.
of also the like, I've always kind of felt this way. Like, I've always been like, well, why can't I show my body? Why can't, like, why? Like, again, back to, I'd always ask why. I'm like, can you tell me why I have to wear more modest clothes, or like why I like can't take these kind of photos?
Yeah.
And it's just like, it forces people around me to try to convince me why not, and they can't. It also has forced me to like have those opinions where, like I said, people, when it's not an issue in their life, they don't have the opinions and they're fine just being like, oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of made that conversation come up, but then also had to like forced me to have that opinion and be like, so why do you do that? but then also be settled in, like, I actually don't have to explain that to you.
Yeah. I resonate with that a lot in us doing this podcast. It's like, you know, we're putting ourselves in a public forum and are available to be misunderstood, misjudged. People make assumptions about us. People ask questions about us. And I've had friends ask other friends if I'm off the deep end because of something I said on the podcast or things like that. And it's, in a way, it is sort of liberating because it's like, well, this is all out here now. So, you know, I'll just carry on. And like, it does force you to like, answer questions that you wouldn't have answered before because it's like, well, if we're going to talk about this on the podcast or we're going to have this guest on or whatever, like, what do I think about that really? Because it's affecting me now. And before it wasn't necessarily, or it was easier to ignore. And I think that so much of it is also just becoming a more and more like whole and compassionate human, you know, like you're coming more into your own, and that looks like a lot less, you know, shame and hiding.
Right. And it also kind of has like given me, it caused the like mass exodus from my life, like of all the people that can't handle it. And so once that happened, I was like, oh, so why should I not just post all my opinions now? Like, I already have all these people thinking I'm going crazy for what I post, so I'll just keep going. So that's where I've just now been more on my, like, further side of the feminism and just posting all about different controversial topics in this town.
Well, because in a sense, it's like, what else do you have to lose, you know? It's like all the people who maybe you thought were friends made it very clear that they were.
Right. And so it's like, oh, okay. It kind of gave me like that new confidence to just be like, well, this is actually what I believe. And it's not like like when I'm trying to like so deeply connect and learn connect to myself and learn about myself, it would be inauthentic to not share these other parts of me. For sure. And these other things that I like believe so strongly about.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, it's kind of funny to me that, you know, you posting boudoir photos means that something is different about like your faith inherently. Like why are those even considered to be like connected to like the Christian church at large? Or like if you post about feminism or racism or, you know, homosexuality, I'll like insert to like controversial item here. Like, why does that mean that you are then quote unquote off the deep end in your faith? Because to me, that's just like such a limited view of what Christianity even is.
I think it's also like, I have found that people are, for one, just scared of humanity. And it's like, actually, I'm just outwardly sharing the real human sides of my process and my thoughts and my opinions. And everything you're doing is just a secret. And so I don't see how that makes you more of a Christian or whatever than me.
Yeah, because you're like presenting a good face.
Where it's like you look like the amount of pastors I know that I know what they're doing that they're not sharing. But then they're over here like shaming and outwardly saying that, oh, I must not be Christian because this is what I'm posting. And I'm like, but if people saw what you were doing, they'd think the same about you. And it's like, I don't judge that, where I'm like, I know. Like, to me, Christianity is a relationship with God, and that's it. It's not a church. And so these people that are like hiding their real lives to be in some type of leadership at a church, to me, is just way more inauthentic than me just posting my naked body on the internet.
It sure is.
And it's so sad, too, because it's the idea that, like, you can't bring yourself authentically to the table for the sake of some sense of power or authority or leadership.
It's the control.
Which, like, why... my mind goes back to, like, why do you even want that if you can't be yourself, you know?
We don't consider, like, true giftings, people that actually help people find freedom, people that actually wrestle with complex decisions, people who push boundaries and make a way for more people to find acceptance and love. Like, leadership is very different in the church.
And that's kind of like my simple answer when people are like, oh, well, are you still a Christian? And I'm like, I know the person being that I think is God and that I have a relationship with, and that's the end of that for me. And it's like, whatever you are trying to give me right now or force upon me that like says inherently that my body and me as a human is bad, my God wouldn't say that about me. And so I don't want whatever version of like Christianity that is.
Yeah. I think people get their panties in a twist about like wanting someone to put a label onto what their faith is, or
even just saying like, but no, mine's right, yours is wrong. And I'm like,
wow, you changed my mind.
Like, simply you don't get to say that.
Yeah.
Like, if you get to say yours is right, I get to say mine's right.
Yeah.
And there's absolutely nothing that you could say that would convince me that you're right and I'm wrong.
Yeah. Well, because like, my fallback has always been like, well, I believe what I believe because I think it's right? Like, I wouldn't believe it if I thought it was wrong.
Right.
Because how would I reconcile that in my head? So you believe what you believe because you think it's right, and someone else who has very different views than you believes what they believe because they think it's right, whether they think it's right because of conditioning they've received throughout their life or whatever. Like, they do think it's right. But this idea of like wanting to force or coerce others into thinking what you think is right is is
I'm like, whoa.
like that's just that it's just like such a fruitless practice, you know, like it there's, what is the impetus behind that? Because at the end of the day, like, why is that your concern?
I could answer that from a Christian perspective, because I think that people have very real concerns, right? Like, the theology is that this is what it takes to get into heaven and to be fully accepted by God. This is what you have to do in order for Christ's sacrifice on the cross to count for you. This is what you have to do to receive X gift, whatever. Get the fullness of, your life. And if you don't do these things, and if you don't ascribe to this certain set of beliefs, and you have differing opinions, then maybe your faith isn't quite authentic. And even though lots of people think they're going to make their way into the kingdom of heaven, only a few will. And that is biblical. And so this motivation is, I am searching with everything that I have to know God and know him in such a way that when I, reach the pearly gates of heaven, he knows me too. And as the church teaches, in order for that to be done, I have to follow this specific set of rules, and I have to have this certain type of relationship with God, and I have to understand God as a person based on this specific set of criteria. And so what it circles, I don't think it's a surprise that with that framework that people would see something like boudoir, that they would see any sort of like possible thing that could potentially pull you away from the true center of what it means to have faith, that's dangerous. And so they cut those things out of their life for the purpose of trying to stay as pure in their pursuit of God as possible. So I think there's lots of motivation behind it.
I think what scares people about my answer to all of this is that I don't care what their translation of the Bible says. Because it's always like not discounting everything you explained.
No, and I'm not saying that it's valid, but I'm saying that is very real, visceral
that is what
set
people
of rules that people are living
they say
under. It's not trivial.
It's biblical. The moment I realized that it was just a court of men that sat around and decided what to put in the Bible, it's people deciding what the Bible says. And just doing that kind of research of there are certain words like homosexuality that was not in the Bible until 1946 or something.
Yeah.
That just was put in there. And I'm like, well, I'm going to take it out. What do you mean? If you can put that in there, why can't I take it out?
Yeah.
That kind of thing where I'm like, it actually doesn't win me over or convince me of anything to say, like, well, like, biblically, this is what you should do. Like, I don't go by the Bible. And I think that's what scares a lot of people around here is that I'm actually, like, I grew up Christian. I grew up in churches. But I've kind of flipped to, like, I have, like, a personal relationship, like what I said, with God or whoever I'm talking to. And I've flipped to everything that I've been taught is that humans are important and special and cared for. And anything that you are trying to give me outside of that, like, it goes to, like, humanity and feminism and all this stuff first. And then if your Christianity fits into it, cool, kind of thing. Where, like, I feel like a lot of people go from, like, oh, I'm a Christian, but then I'm becoming feminist. But it's still kind of like, oh, well, like, I'm taking the pieces of feminism that fits into my Christianity.
Yeah.
But I am kind of
You're not allowed to do that with Christianity, like, to take what fits for you.
But it also kind of just, like, flips for me, and I'm like, no, actually, I feel very confident in whatever relationship I have with God.
Yeah.
That I don't feel like I need to fit anything that I'm feeling. Like, I don't need to get rid of these pieces to fit into, like, a religion. And so it's like, no, actually, I'm just thinking humans first here. And so when people are like, oh, well, this religion believes that these people will just go to hell for whatever, I'm like, I don't want that one. Like, I don't know. People just get so caught up and they're like, well, then you're off the deep end, you're going to hell. And I'm like,
I don't have to believe that, essentially.
I don't believe what you believe.
Yeah.
And it's like the moment I have, like, literally sat at a table with people that wrote a translation of the Bible. And this man looked me in my eyes and asked me to give him a prophetic word. And it was that moment that I was like, okay, I hear from God. No less than you do. And so for you to be putting things in the Bible that, like, condemns me, I don't accept. Like, simply. Or I'm just like, I actually, like, you're not proving to me that you have more power over what God says than I do.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is, like, at the end of the day, if you believe that we are created by God in God's image, et cetera, then we also receive, consciences from God. We receive internal direction from God. And, I mean, at least in my, like, worldview, like, everything comes back to God, to the divine. And so, like, if all these things flow from the divine, then, like, how can you tell me that the conscience and the morals and the ethics that I stand behind are wrong? Because they come from this. I think that the only time that I can think of where it's appropriate to, like, infringe on someone else's beliefs is when it's harming others, when it's actively harming people.
Right.
And that's when it's like, okay, now we need to draw lines. Now we need to say, you actually can't believe this, or, like, this is wrong.
Right.
But, your conscience, your beliefs, your whatever, like, that is you.
Yeah. And it's like, like I said, go back to just, like, humanity. And I'm like, if we're believing, like, God made you in his image, then I'm like, then this whole body is important and good. So these pieces that I'm being told, like, no, that's shameful. Keep that hidden. Keep this, whatever. Like, you're not supposed to experience this. It's just, it doesn't make sense to me. I'm like, it's actually just contradicting yourself to be like, no, you are made holy, beautiful, and pure, and whatever, like, nothing you can do whatever. And I'm like, this doesn't add up then. These pieces are conflicting.
Yeah. Wow. We've covered a lot of things, I feel like, and somehow have gone on some very, obviously interesting, compelling tangents about the church and sexuality and sexual expression and artistic process and all that jazz. And I love it. But Ellie, as we wrap things on up, as we come to a close, we have to ask you the telltale question that we ask every guest, which is, what does woman being mean to you?
I was thinking about this all week, to be honest. I was like, what does it mean? And I think to me, it is just simple. Just the simple, literal statement of woman being. And it's kind of what I try to communicate, honestly, in a lot of my work is just like, no, women are allowed to be. Like, just a woman's body doing anything is good. And that's kind of just the message we've gotten is like, no, women bodies and women doing anything are bad and shameful and should be hidden, should be to the side, be controlled, be whatever. But I think just like, I like the phrase woman being because it's just like, no, it's just simple. And we're allowed to just be in any space, in any category, and in any way.
Yeah. We have full license to be.
Exactly. And I think that's because kind of a lot of what I love to talk about and say is just like humanity and letting humans experience humanity. And it's like, actually, I'm in the in-between a lot. Like, I don't have this like answer. I still have body dysmorphia. I still like struggle with eating disorder behaviors. And like, I don't, because a lot of the times I feel like it's one or the other of like, oh, someone's really struggling or they've figured it out. And I'm like, sometimes I figured it out. Yeah. Sometimes I'm struggling.
Yeah.
And it's
both
just
those things could be true in the same day, in the same hour.
And just that sense of just like, okay, actually humanity as they are and women just being it's good and okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
I love that. So, based off of all that we've talked about today, Ellie, do you have any resources, any of your go-tos to further our woman beings education around these topics or things that have been helpful to you?
Yeah, so this is another thing I was thinking about of what to share. I think for me, the ones that I want to like highlight are specifically in like the social media world, because a lot of like obviously the boudoir photography and a lot of what I do is on social media and like public. So there's one girl, her name's Nadia. She started a company called August Co. It is a period brand. So she makes period products. They're my absolute favorite. She's like 22 years old. She just graduated from Harvard last year.
Nice.
A smart girl. But she started a nonprofit called Period that is like educating young people.
I've heard of them.
Yeah. She started that. And she just kind of like, I literally found her on TikTok like a while ago. She posts just extremely real content about being on her period. Like she will post photos with like a tampon string hanging out. Or like she'll post literally like, this is how you use a tampon. Like literally just straight up content that people were never given.
Yeah.
So I love her. And I think it's her just whole company and brand is important.
For sure.
And then another one is just an account that I follow that it's Namaste Hannah, I think is what it is.
Okay.
She just posts very blatant, like, facts. If you follow me on Instagram, you've probably seen me share her stuff before. But it's just normalizing human body and space. Like, she does a lot of, not necessarily, like, the boudoir type photography, but more just, like, her body in places. And then just, like, clear statements around them. And it's kind of like feminism vibes.
We love feminism vibes around here.
Feminism vibes. A girl named Gabby that started an underwear brand called Cherry.
Cute.
It literally, she found the issue where underwear, sorry, Victoria's Secret, is so tiny.
Yes.
No,
in
it's
the
super
crotch. Where like
So small.
it's so small, and then not every woman's body fit in there. So she literally just created an underwear brand where it is like wider in the crotch area.
For her.
But
Yes,
she is
because
another
the
one.
front wedgie is the worst.
Right.
Oh, yeah. Don't get in between my labia. Mm-mm.
Exactly. So she started this underwear brand, but she also does what Nadia does, where she like has a TikTok and just creates like education and like all these videos and just being like, no, my vulva does not fit in underwear.
Yeah.
Like it just does not. And people
Yeah.
are like, wait, what? And she's like, And then half the people are like, wait, same.
Yeah.
And so it's just kind of like bringing awareness to people
Yeah.
Even
and their
if she's-
bodies.
Just you saying that, I'm like, oh my God. Why do they make underwear so small? Like, it never occurred to
Right.
me that was something that could be fixed.
Right. And she was like, no, literally, like, I think the stats are she's like, the average woman's vulva is like 2.5 inches wide or something. And most underwear is 2 inches. And then hers is like 3 or 3.5 inches, I think. And I bought her
Praise.
underwear. It's expensive, but it's just because it's her running this small company.
Yeah.
And it's like some of the best underwear I've ever bought.
Nice.
So, yeah. So her and Nadia and Hannah just post real human bodies. And it's just people I think that you should follow.
Dang, I'm gonna have to go buy some panties.
Buy some
10 out of 10.
panties, buy some period products, buy all the
Just
things.
stock up, you
Support
know?
all the amazing feminist ladies.
Small female businesses. Love
For
it.
sure.
So, speaking of small female businesses, how can the woman beings
Me.
find you, Ellie?
Most of my stuff these days goes through just my Instagram, which is Ellington, ELL.INGTON. Or my actual like boudoir photography is Callie Booty, but like boudoir, so it's Callie BOUDI.
Or do you-
Like,
That's
nice.
booty.
Yeah,
But
like booty,
yeah.
but
like
boudoir.
Yeah.
That is
Booty.
so
Like
cute.
in California.
Like, very cute.
Yeah,
Kelly
you
girl,
guys
you know.
should definitely give her a follow.
For
and
sure.
if you're in the Reading area and you need some saucy photos for you, then you should slide into her DMs or something. I
Should
don't
slide
know.
in my DM.
Print them out, hang them up on your walls in your
For sure.
bathroom. All for
Surprise
you.
any guests.
I'm like, yes, and this is me on top of a mountain, topless.
I should do that.
Yeah.
Just print my nudes.
Yeah.
and have them in the bathroom.
Make wallpaper out of them.
Oh my gosh. That'd be so
That'd be
fun.
amazing. Like little
That would
tiny
look
prints
really
of them
cool.
that are
Of
like
just,
the
like-
pattern of the wallpaper, and then
That's a
you
good
look
idea.
closely and they're like, "That's your butt." I
And you're
think.
like, yes,
that.
you're welcome.
Yes, those are nipples. Thank you.
Yeah, love it. Speaking of following people, you guys should also follow us at Woman Being Podcast on Instagram. We're womanbeingcommunity.com on the internet website place that we have. And we're also Woman Being Podcast on TikTok. We're on all the podcast platforms. Unless there's one we're not on, then you should let us know because we want to be on it. But we're on Amazon. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, etc., 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 and YouTube. So really, if you're not finding us, you're not trying very hard because we're freaking everywhere.
But since you're listening to this, you probably have found us. In which
Yes.
case, you should do something. Which
Yeah.
is
Leave us a review.
Yes.
That is what you should do. Leave us a review. Give us some comments. Give us a follow. Depending on what platform you're on, whatever applies, do all the things. And if you're wanting to receive a different woman being experience, then find us on a different platform that you don't already follow us on.
heck yeah.
Anyways, all that to say, we are actually, this is, I think, our last episode of this season.
Oh my god,
Talk about it.
Well,
Yeah,
season finale.
This is our last episode of this season. We will be back in full force in a couple months in September. But you might also be getting some sneaky bonus episodes
There
this
might
summer.
be just a couple.
I
Stay
don't know.
tuned.
Although I do know because we do it. But you don't know. But maybe you could get some sneak peeks into those episodes if you follow us on our social media platforms. Wink, wink.
She actually winked for anyone
I did
listening.
actually wink,
Yeah.
and I had to say the wink since we are auditory as well. Anyways, all that self-promotion to say, thank you so much for joining us, Ellie.
Thank you,
Yes,
Ellie.
you're the best.
Thank you
Happy
for
to be
having some feminist convos with us down all the feminist rabbit trails.
We'll have to do some photo shoots.
For sure.
Oh my gosh.
You never
I
know, you might
already
see
told
some-
her I would get naked for her any day. So
Any day.
I love
any day. You
Love
tell
when
me.
women
That's
tell me that.
amazing. All right. We will catch you guys next time that we pop up on your feed. See you then.
Bye.
Bye.